Tip. I'm Anna Yanenga Asante. On March 17th, 2012, Malefikete Asante, my husband, and I opened the doors to the Malefikete Asante Institute. Inspired by our visits to the W.E.B. Du Bois Center in Accra, Ghana, we found the vision and energy to create an institution that would serve the education and research interests of the African community. It is an independent African think tank devoted to Afrocentric training, history, and curriculum development. Named for Malefikete Asante, the most prolific African American scholar, the leading advisor to doctoral students in the history of American education, and the founder of the Afrocentric paradigm, the Malefikete Asante Institute for Afrocentric Studies honors the work and vision of a person who has traveled and spoken worldwide and has been recognized as a leading intellectual in the African world. His writings have been called spectacular, and he remains the most prolific African American scholar with more than 100 books and 500 articles. The MKA Institute is located in the historic Germantown neighborhood of Philadelphia, near George Washington's summer White House, Uncle Bobby's Coffee and Bookshop, and the Lest We Forget Museum, in an area of Philadelphia that was the home of Tony Cade Bambara, Sonia Sanchez, Bobby Seale, David Richardson, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, Ife Niowu, and numerous other musicians, artists, and Pan African leaders. Conceived as a library and community meeting place, the MKA Institute has become a think tank where scholars meet, debate, and discuss critical ideas related to the African diaspora. The MKA Institute is dedicated to three overarching visions: research excellence, education centeredness, and culture exhibition. Research. Our aim is to report the work of the best scholars to the members of our community. The Institute has a library of thousands of books collected over several decades. A number of outstanding scholars serve as fellows to the Institute. Education. We hold classes, courses, conferences, and symposia to advance knowledge, advocate solutions, and provide strategies for dealing with political, social, and cultural issues. Teaching Sikam and other African languages. The MKA Institute is an active participant in community education. Culture. We are a historical, social, and cultural institution showcasing and exhibiting the artistic and literary talents of African people. Artists such as Ife Niowu, Whitson Hunter, Richard Wyatt, and Abdias Nascimento are among our permanent collection. The MKA Institute has hosted many outstanding speakers. Committed to an Afrocentric vision, the MKA Institute is a nonprofit 501c3 organization seeking to improve its community, revitalize the neighborhood, and celebrate our youth in the tradition of Malefi Kete Asante. Welcome, and please visit us at our website, themkainstitute.com.
Y'all ready to clap? Woo! All right. Hotel. Welcome once again to the Malefe Kete Asante Institute, 5535 Germantown Avenue, Afrocentric think tank. For those that are joining us online, when you come to Philadelphia, make sure you stop by the Institute. And if not, just make sure you keep on logging on to the YouTube page and tuning in and checking in with us. It's very important that we talk directly to one another. You know, throughout history, we've often had middlemen and middle women, who are agents and agent provocateurs and masters of disinformation that separated the members of the diaspora, right? They tell Africans something about African Americans, tell African Americans something about Africans, and then they tell, people in Haiti something about Jamaicans, and everybody's all confused because they had, some dissension based on disinformation. So I'm so thankful that we have an institute and we have the technology so we can talk to each other all over the world with no middlemen or interference. And today we're going to have a great example of that. So shout out to Liberia and shout out to North Philly and shout out to everybody tuning in from all over the African world. At this time, I'm bringing up the namesake of this institute, Dr. Molefi Kete Asante, to do the official welcome and introduction of today's presenter. But we welcome you all and we thank you for being here, Dr. Asante.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ade Hotep. It is so beautiful to see you, and it's so wonderful to be here on this occasion. We have an incredible program for you today. We have two outstanding people who are going to be presenting, and it's going to be so wonderful because we have recognized here today Liberia as well as Ethiopia. Isn't that something? That is so. So those of you who are on YouTube, we want you to know that this is an incredible Pan-African event. We are happy and delighted to have this program today, and we have programs here periodically. And our next speaker will be actually Tanuraman. Tanuraman is actually an activist for the liberation and the freedom of Sudan. He's with us almost every year. He's going to be here on November the 2nd. And then after that, we have Michael Cord, the angriest man in America. He'll be here. An attorney with great skill and knowledge, somebody who can help us understand the political situation that we're in this country. So Michael is incredible. So he's going to be here. So we just have a lineup, and we're increasing our lineup and developing our lineup from month to month. And we're so happy for the support that we have been getting from this community, the Philadelphia community, and from the international community. Let me just say to you that we are on the tip of a vast canyon of chaos, and that we, as African people, at least in the country that's called the United States of America, we have always been the custodians of freedom. Nobody in this country has ever taken that commitment as much as those of us who recognize that during the enslavement of Africans, we fought every day for our freedom. And the word freedom comes from us. It's not from the U.S. Constitution. They talk about liberty. We talk about freedom because we were in bondage. And the whole idea of getting out of bondage is to be free. And this was the drive and the passion of the African people from the very beginning. And so I say that to say to you that the political and social rupture that we find in this society today, we have got to challenge that. It always falls on African Americans challenge. We've been sitting back for a little bit, sort of watching and see that. Well, let's see what other people are going to do. Let's see how they're going to do this. Now we know what to do, and we've been doing it, and we have done it since we have been in this country. And our history, our character, our sense of morality and ethics, particularly when it comes to this question of justice and injustice, we've always been the proper standard for the American society. We've always been that way. And let me just tell you, and I'm going to introduce the speakers, but I have to say this because it's important for us to know this, that one of the great tricks of those who want to impose on us a worldview that is narcissistic, that is detrimental, that is destructive, is to make sure that you don't hear our voices. So that's why our books are banned. One of the reasons you ban books, you don't want people to know what's the truth in those books. Ban those books, you know? So my books were banned in Florida. And I know that other people's books, many people's books are being banned every day, because the idea is you can't, they don't want you to have the truth. If you have the truth, you can stand on a platform that's solid. You see, that's very important. So that's one of the ways, ban books. Then the other way is to take the language of the people and turn it around. So this is why you hear someone say, oh, that's woke culture. Woke is not good. Wait a minute, woke is good. There's nothing wrong with being enlightened. That's what woke means, to be awake. It means to be conscious. It means to be aware. And we knew what we meant when we talked about people being woke. We said, that's woke. You got to have some enlightenment. But they turned it and make it a bad thing. We don't want woke. No, you need woke. And in fact, what we do at the Malefic Kete Asante Institute is to wake you up every time we can, because that's important for you to be awake and for other people to be awake. And don't let people tell you things like DEI is bad. There's nothing wrong with diversity. There's nothing wrong with inclusion. There's nothing wrong with equity. Those are good words. There's nothing wrong with them, except that in the hands and the minds of those who would do damage to the perfect union of the American nation, for example, they want to make that a bad thing. This nation was diverse before the Europeans came. There were many, many ethnic groups of Native Americans. Many, many, many. And not only was it diverse then, but it became more diverse when many Europeans came from all over Europe. And they didn't even have immigration laws back in those days. Any European can just get on a boat and come to America. Statue of Liberty say, welcome, come on in, right? And they just came in. That's the way it was. And then, of course, what has happened is that the country has become browner and blacker. And they say, oh, we got to have some laws here. We got to stop these people from coming in. We came in, but we can't let them come in. Not like that. You see, that's a dangerous attitude. And it's an attitude that believes that there are some people who are better than other people, and some people more valuable than other people. We don't believe that. And Africans have never believed that in this country. We've never believed that. We've fought for everybody. And all the rights that we have gained through our own activism and through our own intelligence and through our own will and commitment to ethics and values, all of those gains and the progress that we have shared with other people. And I remember growing up in Georgia and not being able to go to the University of Georgia because I was Black. But now anybody can go to the University of Georgia. Chinese people come and go to the University of Georgia, but they couldn't go to the University of Georgia before Black people fought and made the University of Georgia open its doors to all people, because African Americans did that. And throughout the history, African Americans have demonstrated that will and that power to say, let's expand the opportunities for everybody. That's the way we've been. So I just want to say that we're happy to have you here. There's much, much more to be said, and I will say much more when I have a time, but this is not my time. This is the time of the wonderful writer, Victoria Geleplay, Corlon, and also Mikia Sise. But I'm going to introduce first Victoria Corlon, and I want to say to you that she's from Liberia, but she has mastered the technique that all of us ought to master of telling a story. I've read the book that she's written, at least most of it. I have not finished it yet. It's called Between Two Worlds. And it is fascinating to me. I should say fascinating. We will probably have questions for her. She has that book. That book is for sale, and hopefully we will be able to display it. Do you have books here to be displayed? And she will tell us more about it. But she is a registered nurse. But beyond that, she is a writer and a skilled writer, someone who understands the use of language and also understands the use of narrative. And I've just enjoyed reading her writing. We're happy to have her here, her family here, to listen to her. And those of you who are on YouTube and those of you in Liberia, one of the countries that I appreciate and like so much, you will be hearing a really a wonderful speaker. We'll have some questions, I'm sure, for her regarding this great person, Joseph Geleplay, and his struggle for education in Liberia. After she finishes, I will also introduce an outstanding political and social and educational and communication servant, and actually soon to be an authority with a PhD in communication, Mikia Sise, from the great and ancient country of Ethiopia. But at this time, we're going to ask Victoria Corlon to come up and give us. All right, give her a big applause. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Victoria Geleplay Corlon. I am from Liberia. My background is nursing. I also work at a mental health facility in Delaware, drug and alcohol and mental health. First, I thank you, Dr. Asante, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I thank you, everyone, for being here. A famous educator once said that every child deserves a champion. An adult who would never give up on a child, who understands the power of connection, and who insists that a child be the best that they can be. I am here today to tell you that my father, Joseph Geleplay, did just that for his community and for his country. You see, Joseph was born in a small village called Kanweken in Liberia in 1919. During that time, there were no electricity, no road network, no running water, no telephone, none of the comfort that we enjoy today. They had nothing. So for making announcements, they had somebody called the town crier. The town crier will walk from one end of the village to another end, just shouting out the information that needed to be told. When they travel, they use machete to cut the bushes. In Liberia, machete is called cutlass. Mm-hmm. So we use the cutlass to cut the bushes to create walking path. That's how they went to their farms and they visited other villages. For water, they dug wells and they went to the creek to fetch water for drinking. They washed their clothes at the creek and dried their clothes on rocks and leaves, grass. That's the world that Joseph grew up in. That's the world he was born into. They were happy. A community of hardworking people who lived by the rhythm of the land and instructions from their ancestors. They were very pleased with their lives until the Western culture came along. Now, let me tell you a little story about the Western culture in Liberia. Our history tells us that Liberia was founded in 1822 by free slaves from America. Sometimes I find that hard to wrap around my brain because there were people already there.
That's right.
It reminds me of the story of Christopher Columbus and how he discovered America.
Right.
However, when the free slaves went to Liberia, they met up with opposition because they were trying to impose their rules, their way of living to the natives that they met there. And the natives were like, no, we're not going to have that. How dare you come to our place and tell us how to live, how to govern ourselves? Because of that, there were a lot of fighting. They fought a great battle. At the end, they came to a negotiation where the free slaves settled in Morovia along the coastal lines. When they settled, they formed their government. Government mirrored right after the United States, where they left.
Mhm.
They built schools. They built churches. And the sad thing is, the natives were not allowed to participate in the government.
Mhm.
They forced them to pay taxes.
Mhm.
Their kids were not allowed to go beyond 8th grade education if they were lucky to go to school. That created friction for a long time, but nothing happened. The people just took it. They called the indigenous, they met there, they called them the country people. So the country people, for them to go to school, most of them had to live with the Congo people. They called the free American slaves Congo people. So they had to live with them. It's sad because the slaves, the settlers, they treated the indigenous the exact same way that
Right.
they were treated in the
Right.
United States when they were slaves.
That's right.
You know, there's this phrase in psychology where they say, hurt people hurt people.
That's right.
I cannot stomach that. You would think when you have been hurt, you would do the opposite.
Yes.
But no, they treated them the exact same way that they were treated in the United States.
Mhm.
It was not until 1931 when the first American missionaries went to Liberia, when they went to actually my village, Kanweken. At that time, my father was 12 years old. He was already a curious young man. He wanted to know everything. He was into everything. And then the missionaries got there. They were talking about education. They talk about the gospel. They talk about civilization. That's what they went to do for the people, they claim. So Joseph and other kids were very excited about this new war. They wanted to know. The adults, though, were not too excited about that because that was against their way of life. They were farmers, they were hunters, they were warriors when the need arose. So they were not into education and all of that other stuff. But the excitement was short-lived for these young people because the missionaries left after a while. After some time again, they went back for the second time. Another group of missionaries went back. Again, Joseph and other kids enrolled in their school. The school became large. The students became more. And the missionaries could not work with them alone. So they arranged for Joseph to teach some of the younger kids. And then after he was done, and then they taught him. So he became a student teacher. That went on for some time until World War II happened. During World War II, America pulled all of their missionaries out of Liberia. But Joseph continued to teach these kids. He believed that education was the only way. Education was the way to give his people voice, to give them seat at the table, to know about contracts. The world was changing, and Joseph wanted his people to know about what was going on. So he kept on teaching the children. At that time, he had 8th grade education, which was normal for Liberians, the country people at that time. At first, the Conwican people did not think much of it. They thought Joseph was going to, stop teaching gradually. Eventually, he was going to stop because the missionaries came and they left, and Joseph was going to do the same thing. He was just going through a phase. But he didn't stop. He kept on teaching. Every morning, Joseph's wife, my mother, Mabel, she made pastry. Every morning he walked from door to door, enticing the kids. He asked them, "Do you want to learn how to read and write? Your peers are over there learning how to read and write." And he would give them pastry. He bribed them. And they went to school. The elders got angry. They told him to stop. You need to stop this school nonsense because now our kids are not going on a farm to help us. We have nobody to do our farming. You got these children, you're talking about school, you are lazy, and you're making our kids lazy. So we want you to stop. But the more they pressured Joseph, the more he continued to teach. The more the kids came over. They closed down the school that the missionary had started, so Joseph started teaching the kids on his porch. So one day they find him. They said, "We got to find him. If we find him, he will not be able to pay the fine and he will stop teaching." So they asked him to bring a cow, a sack of rice, several gallons of palm oil, and other provisions. Joseph could not afford that. But his father went to the front of the crowd and said, "I will pay the fine for my son. He is doing all of this with his own resources. He's not getting paid for this, and this is for the betterment of our people. But you don't understand it, and you're finding him. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have anything, so I'm going to pay the fine." So his father paid the fine for him. But that was not enough for the elders because they wanted him to stop the education thing right away, point blank, period. They said, "Oh, now we know exactly the next step." So the next step, one night, they went to Joseph with a torch. They told him, "Here, take this. You have to leave this village. Leave Karikan. We don't want you here anymore. We don't want your education. You are lazy and making our kids lazy. You're not obeying us. You're not going by our rules. So you have to leave." When the elders tell you to leave, you leave. Even your parents, nobody could help you because they were like the gods. They ruled the village. So they told Joseph to leave, and he left. After a few agonizing days in the forest, in the woods, all by himself, he ended up in another village called Sioleken. When he told the people his story, he told the elders his story, they embraced him. They opened their arms to him. They said, "Joseph, we want you. We want school in our village. In fact, we will give you a piece of land. We will give you land to build your school and to build your house. We want school in our village." So Joseph sent word back to Karikan for his wife and 11 boys that believed in his dream. He said, "The people of Siolikan accepted me. I want you to come and help me build the school." So they went and built the school. The school was very successful. People from nearby villages sent their kids to the school. Everybody was singing his praise in the region. Even Karikan heard good things about Joseph. So one day, Joseph decided to put into practice what he had been teaching his students about the country, the culture, the history. So there is this holiday in Liberia called it's called Flag Day. It's celebrated every year, August 24th. It's to commemorate the date the flag was adopted. So during the celebration, they have patriotic marches and speeches are given by dignitaries and other citizens, and cultural dances are done all over the country. So it's a very big holiday. So Joseph told his students about that. He educated them about August 24th, and now he needed to put that into practice. So the days leading up to the holiday, he sewed uniforms for his students, military-like uniforms. He also made hats, like the military hats. He made that out of leaves and pigs. And the kids dressed up in their gear, ready to march. They started marching from one village to another, singing and dancing and shouting, "Parade, parade, parade, parade. We at Temple Tribal School marching through your town." And it went on from village to village until they got to Kawikin. When I was a little girl and I heard the story, I knew that they were going to end up in Kawikin. He was going to show them, see what I can do. So I knew where the story was going. But Joseph and his students ended up in Kawikin. They said they put out the best performance ever that the people had ever seen. They were so proud. They started talking among themselves. "Oh, that's our son. He went and transformed that village. That could have been us. Why didn't we do it? Why did we send him away?" So they had a meeting. They wanted Joseph back. And some of them said, "Well, we can just apologize and he will come back to us." And another group said, "Oh no, we do not apologize to young people. They will have no respect for us, but we can do something to make him to come back to us." So few weeks after August 24th, the Siawlikan village that had accepted Joseph, they called him and said, "You have to leave. You have broken one of our traditional rules, so you have to leave." Joseph was flabbergasted. Like, what rule? What did I do wrong? Everybody liked me. The students like me. The villages are talking about me. Everything is great. I didn't do any. He tried to explain to them that he was innocent of whatever they were talking about. They couldn't listen. They said, "You have to leave." So Joseph went. He left the place with his family, went back to Kawikin, where they accepted him. They gave him a place. He built his school, built his house, and business was as usual. Joseph taught for 6 years with his own resources without getting any pay. The total numbers of years that he taught were 37 years. Wow. And later on, he decided he wanted to be a representative for his people. He ran in the government. The first and second time he didn't win. The third time he won. Joseph felt it was necessary to have proper representation. He wanted his people to be aware of this changing world. The world was changing, and he wanted his people to be represented. So he won, and he became a representative. Through his leadership, he was able to elevate his town, his little village, from village status to a township status. And because of that, they were able to get funding for education. Now, whether you are a student, educator, or policymaker, or just anybody who is passionate about a human story, this book, Between Two Worlds, is not just a biography of my father. It's a story that will inspire you. It will motivate you. There are a lot of heroes, a lot of Joseph Geleplays around us. And it's important for us to talk about them. Those people, they don't get medals. They don't get awards. Nobody talk about it. History often forget them. So I encourage you to look around you and cherish those people in your lives and be able to tell their story. This is my way. This book is my way of honoring my father and giving him a voice. There are a lot of Joseph Geleplays out there. I encourage you to tell your story. Your story is important, and you are going to inspire somebody. But before I leave, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I thank my family who's not here, and my husband and 2 sons in the back. And I thank my niece who is also here, Dr. Asante. I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I also thank my publisher who is here, September Summer. She is sitting right here. She is my publisher. And I thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Wow. Very well, this is an example. She is a perfect example of the Geleplay spirit. I mean, just like her father, she is that same set, the same spirit and same commitment. And I'm so happy to see her publisher because I've known her publisher in the past. I'm so happy to see her here as well. That is so wonderful. I'm telling you, we have so much talent and so much skill. And this story it's inspirational to me. And one of the things that I really believe that we need at this time in our history is inspiring people. Can you imagine that we have in the United States a president who doesn't inspire people? There's no inspiration. There's no way, you can guarantee that he's not going to inspire people to come together or inspire people to negotiate. There's no inspiration. It's all about himself. And this is a strange world because it's not the world that African people grow up in. It's not the one that we know about. You have to have people who are committed to things outside of themselves. And Joseph Geleplay is definitely one of those people. And I just hope that, do you have books available, right? How much do they cost? $30. You should get one before you leave. But let me just tell you that right now, I'm going to introduce another one of our, geniuses. That's all I could say. In fact, Makia Sise has been an inspiration since he's been in Philadelphia to me. This man has a diverse professional background. I mean, if you think of someone who has worked not just in media, but in economics and politics and agriculture, then you're talking about this man. As someone said earlier, that, we have people in this audience who come to this think tank all the time who have incredible skills. Macias has a BA in language and literature. He has an MA in peace and security. He's worked for the United Nations. He's worked for the World Bank. He's worked for the African Union in various capacities in terms of the development of the communities throughout the world. He's worked for the UN Women organization. He's worked for agriculture, and he's working right now on a PhD in communication at Temple. And I am just, I've talked with him frequently. It's wonderful to, sometimes people ask me, how do you know so much? It's because I talk to smart people. I do. And I listen to them. And then I take what I learned from them, and then I tell you, and you say, wow, Dr. Sante is smart. Yeah, because I talked to McKees, and I talked to Ade. I talk to somebody, and then say, no, I learn by talking to you. And that's how you learn. You get information, and you, of course, collaborate. I mean, you find things, corroborate the information. You try to find other information that's similar. But in this case, Macias Sise from Ethiopia will come and talk to us about African solutions to African problems. All right, Macias.
Hotep.
Hotep.
Thank you, Prof, for your warm introduction, but that's way too much. And also, it's difficult for me to speak after such a prolific speaker. First time I ran into Professor Asante, he told me to come to this institute. It so happened that I come from Ethiopia, Africa, a vibrant place, and I've been working in so many African nations. And then I find myself finally in Philadelphia to do my PhD alone. Boring. And I didn't know what to do. In Africa, we say, I am because we are, or I am my brother's keeper. Where are my brothers? And then Asante have me in his wings, under his wings, and brought me here. This is where I found home. Thank you for having me here. And thank you for being my families here. Without further ado, let me go to my topic this afternoon, which is African solutions for African problems. I would frame it as reclaiming epistemological sovereignty, indigenous knowledge, communication, and education in Africa's future. It goes hand in hand with her topic today. Let me give you a bit of context. Dr. Asante has mentioned a bit. I've been working in development, diplomacy, and peace building with the United Nations, African Union, and World Bank Group throughout my career. During my tenure, I learned painfully the gap between the need and the delivery. Resources are, trust me, abundant, but monopoly and lack of willingness to be human, that was what was missing. Superpowers, most of the time the bosses of my offices, prescribe what they think is right without consideration to the details on the ground, as if one size fits all. A rude awakening for me to ask, what's wrong? Where did we get it all? And specifically, it got me to thinking that Africa's pathway to sustainable development and intellectual independence lies in reorienting its epistemological sovereignty, finding African solutions for African problems. Little did I know, when I graduated with my first degree, like Prof said, I was so radicalized against my own culture and tradition. I've been taught so many things, trust me, except knowing who I am, what traditions I have, and that there are multiple ways of understanding the world outside of the Eurocentric approach. My travels across Africa exposed me to critically examine how Eurocentric paradigms have shaped African education system, marginalized indigenous knowledge, and communicative traditions that have long served as foundations of societal solidarity and innovation, which shaped me and my brothers and sisters, and you too. My own country, Ethiopia, as well as Liberia, who are believed to have not been colonized and able to defend its independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity against colonizers, was not spared either. I always wondered what needed to be done and kept asking until one day, while working for African Union Political Affairs Department, I came up with the idea that we need to reconfigure our thinking. At the time, I was tasked with advocating African shared values, one of the strategic pillars of the African Union, to instill the idea in the government machinery as well as everyday life of everyone. What are the shared values? I kept asking. I couldn't find one. And I held a number of seminars to come up with African shared values lists, which gave me the opportunity to see a number of things. None of them provided me satisfactory answer. While traveling between African countries to explore shared values, something struck me. I noticed we have diverse culture, different applications of long-standing African traditions, and more. However, the way we understand the world is somehow similar. The commonality among my own backyard, East Africa, is identical to that of South African, West African, Central African, Northern African, and African descendants in the diaspora. By the way, do you know that the diaspora is officially considered as one of the sub-regions of the African Union? It is. One thing remains similar across all this. I am because we are. And we are all products of the community around us, taught by the philosophy of community that sets us apart from Western individuality. John Locke's philosophy prioritizes individual natural right and self-ownership over the need of the community. Or René Descartes, when he says, I think, therefore I am, or I am, I exist, illustrates the Eurocentric understanding of the world that advocates individualism that supports colonialism and beyond, which was the instrument to enslave everyone or control the countries. On the contrary, Ubuntu, African philosophy, collectively says, I am because we are. Or Asante says, I am most healthy when I am harmonized with others. Both Ubuntu and Asante are talking about that individual fulfillment is achieved through connections with the community. The answer, therefore, was in front of me all along. It was the way we think and understand the world, the African humanism that is the base of our shared values. Hooray, I got the answer. Further reading introduced me to Afrocentricity, decoloniality, and epistemologies of the South. The African shared value is the African epistemology, the indigenous knowledge centered in the Afrocentricity. The rest, as I say, is history. Maybe we can come back to it with Q&A. Let me just focus on how the fusion of indigenous knowledge, formal and informal education, and cultural grounded media became my way of framing African solutions for African problems, where epistemologies, ethics, and education emerged with the African culture and experience rather than being imported from outside. It is sad, it's been like 60, 70 years since most of African countries have become independent from their colonial masters. However, Africa's education system largely remained colonial in structure, curriculum, and logic. The Kenyan, it's been 6 months since he passed away. Ngugi wa Thiong'o describes it as the colonization of the mind. While politically decolonization dismantled imperial administration, it did little to alter the epistemic hierarchies that continue to privilege Western knowledge system over African way of knowledge or knowing. Similar to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, we have Akioko from Nigeria, Kwasi Wirdu from Ghana, Mudimbe from Congo, Okot Pibitek from Uganda, Pauline from Benin, and from my own country, Fakada Zaza, and many more African scholars that have always been saying out and loud that we need to decolonize our minds, our education in particular. The traditional knowledge that endured the test of many millennia are sidelined. Everything we do is shaped by copy-pasting from the West. When I see this Sankofa symbol, I remember that Professor Haile Gerima made a film out of, a film in Ghana and named it Sankofa, in which who says that once Hollywood reaches a little village in Africa, all kids will start to change their hairdo and attire, abandoning the traditions they grew up with, suggesting cognitive dissonance. This is no other than a systemic suppression or reduction of non-Western knowledge. Students across Africa, myself included, are taught to interpret our environment through borrowed frameworks that alienate us from our language, histories, and most importantly, cosmologies. The question, therefore, is not whether Africa possesses a knowledge system. It clearly does, but whether these systems are recognized as authentic. My slogan, of course, adopted from the Agenda 2063, under which the African Union functions, African Solutions for African Problem, implies that answers lies in restoring the authority of indigenous epistemologies as the foundations for education, communication, and policymaking. This possesses The question, how? My humble response is epistemological revolution. Of course, please trust me. I'm not a radical person. Neither am I advocating any radical revolution. I'm just saying we need to emancipate our minds, to see inwards, to think critically. The world we are in today stands at historical juncture, as Prof. earlier said. It is disorienting times that demands critical past, not just reform, but an epistemological revolution. For example, we are witnessing reforms with the so-called international community to which I've been working for the past 20 years. Global multilateral systems, including my former employer, United Nations, that calls for reimagining the global order so far dominated by Western ideals. Probably the proponents of this idea, the international community that we call, are tired of this framework and want to come up with another one that fits their purpose. You know what I mean? Epistemologically, revolution necessitates a shift from Eurocentric paradigms with which the world around is constructed towards intellectual sovereignty rooted in humanities. The real realities are ethical traditions. That's what will save the world, I strongly argue. I'm sure you have read Professor Asante's and Dr. Dove's Being Human Being. That points out that being human extends beyond biological existence and encompasses ethical, social, and epistemological dimensions, emphasizing the interconnection between individual and collective identity. They assert authentic humanity is realized through African-centered frameworks that honor communal responsibility, moral integrity, and self-knowledge. Isn't that what we experienced during the COVID time, or we experienced and already forgot it? Epistemological revolution is not about rejecting science or global knowledge, but rather recontextualizing them with African philosophical frameworks. A critical path to these disorienting times requires exploration, practices, and solidarities. To be fully human, it is to cultivate character, knowledge, and social consciousness with a framework that respects both individual dignity and collective well-being, thereby reclaiming epistemological and cultural sovereignty over African life and thought. Formal education, for example, should incorporate the epistemologies of the South, aligning science and technology with indigenous knowledge, community ethics, and social values. Students must learn not only chemistry, physics, and mathematics, but also the moral and cultural underpinnings of how these disciplines relate to their communities and environments. It's long established that when education is locally anchored, learners develop critical consciousness and self-recognition, understanding where their knowledge originates and how it connects to their identity. Over generations, such pedagogy cultivates a new intellectual culture that challenges dependency and reclaim agency. But it's not the sole task of classroom education. It needs to awaken the entire society, whether they are in class or outside. Education, however, extends beyond the classroom. A holistic approach requires the integration of formal and informal education. In the classroom, formal education must train young Africans in indigenous epistemologies worldview that prioritizes interconnectedness, ethics, and communal well-being. Teaching must be contextual, using local examples, language, and narratives that makes learning culturally resonant. At the same time, informal education rooted in community life, storytelling, ritual, and everyday practice must reinforce the same principle. Without societal reinforcement, school-based learning risks becoming isolated and ineffective. For instance, if a school teaches indigenous ethics but society valorizes imported norms, students will experience cognitive dissonance rather than empowerment. To bridge this gap, communication, my training at large or my profession, becomes central. Media, traditional and digital, formal and informal, must play transformative role in disseminating indigenous knowledge, amplifying local stories, and reshaping collective consciousness. This is where communication must assume its responsibility in deconstructing the narratives and reconstructing it appropriately. Communication is not merely a tool of transmitting information, it is a way of being. Oral traditions, proverbs, songs, and storytellings have long served as repositories of collective wisdom and methods of intergenerational learning. Many scholars of African communication ethics note communication sustains community, mediates conflict, and embodies moral order. Today, both traditional and new media can be reimagined as space for epistemic renewal. Film, television, social media, and even video games can integrate indigenous narratives, philosophies, and ethical frameworks. For example, reimagining folktales as animated stories, videos, games, or dramatizing moral lessons from local traditions in digital formats can bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern forms of learning. This process is not about inventing indigeneity, but resurrecting it, reviving knowledge systems that remain alive in cultural memory but marginalized in formal institutions. When this communicative practice intersect with education, they produce what Freire calls conscientization, an awakening of critical awareness grounded in cultural self-understanding. Don't get me wrong, we use them when we need them. For example, when we feel at home, particularly in Africa, even here in African American communities, back home, mom give us some kind of traditional medicines, and then we keep forgetting it when we need it for policy or anything. So several African contexts illustrate the pragmatic potential of indigenous knowledge and communication traditions when integrated with governance and education. In South Africa, post-apartheid Truth and Reconciliation Commission adopted a policy that drew heavily on Ubuntu philosophy and an ethic of interconnected humanity, summarized as the phrase "I am because we are." I've been talking about that all along. Similar thing happened in Rwanda, but my favorite is Botswana's Ntolo ya Dikogo, House of Chiefs, that functions as a consultative body that ensures national legislation aligns with traditional values and communal wisdoms. These institutions illustrate how indigenous deliberative practices can coexist with so-called modern democratic governance. These examples reveal that African solutions grounded in local epistemologies are neither archaic nor oppositional to modernity. Rather, they embody an alternative modernity, one that harmonizes ethics, culture, and innovation, asserting epistemological sovereignty through examples of explorations, practices, and solidarities. To operationalize the vision of epistemological sovereignty, Africa must invest in both intellectual and communicative infrastructure. Universities and research institutes should promote curricula that integrate indigenous philosophy, local language, and community-engaged scholarship. I'm sure you remember Professor Asante's lecture that was shared with us not long ago, decolonizing our universities. Education policy must acknowledge that development is not merely economic, but cultural and epistemic. To this end, I insist media and institutions must act as cultural archives, documenting oral traditions, amplifying local innovations, and challenging the dominance of important narratives. Communication in this sense becomes the engine of epistemological recentering, enables the public's circulation of ideas rooted in African experiences. SABC, the South African Broadcasting Corporation, or Royal Media Service in Kenya, or Nigerian Nollywood follows the same Eurocentric media model. The fact that Nigeria referring it to its media industry, Nollywood adopting Hollywood, is self-explanatory of its aspiration. Recently, my country, Ethiopia, joined the same group with the Pulse of Africa. Well, Achille Mbembe, a Cameroonian, in his African models of self-writing says, the production of knowledge must speak from Africa rather than about Africa. I believe the convergence of education and communication can produce the new generation of thinkers who are not alienated from cultural rooted but inspired by them. The call for African solutions for African problems must be understood not only as a political slogan but as an epistemological mandate. To solve African problems, Africa must first reclaim the right to define what counts as knowledge, development, and progress. Communication is the soul of the transformation. It shapes identity, sustains memory, and animates community. Education, it is the structure, cultivating minds that can think critically from within their own cultural logic. Indigenous knowledge is the content, the moral and intellectual inheritance that gives meaning to both communication and education. I am pleasantly overwhelmed, probably, if you are aware, I'm not sure, the news that Africa has officially launched its continental internet exchange as of last month, September. A bold infrastructure project backed by African Union that's already being held as a digital revolution of the African. This is a perfect example of appropriating the technology to serve the marginalized people. In other words, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can always appropriate what is on our hand to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. By merging education, communication, indigenous knowledge, and technology, Africa can move from dependency to self-determination, from imitation to innovation. That the continent's renaissance will come. The continent's renaissance will not come from external prescriptions, but from an epistemological awakening that affirms our stories, our philosophies, our language are sufficient for our liberation. Yes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. So you can see the strength of the intellectual work of these two speakers tonight. I mean, this is a wonderful thing. I had the occasion, Macias, of meeting Peggy Pago, who was the ambassador from Cuba to Botswana. And she was telling me about this procedure that you mentioned. I never knew about this, that the House of Kings there ensures that the legislation that is passed in the modern government aligns with the traditions and the customs of the people. That should be done all over Africa. That has to be done. I want to thank you for that presentation. I learned many things. Now, there may be some questions from our audience. I'm not sure if we have any questions from YouTube for either of the speakers. Okay, Doctor, go right ahead.
Yes, Ms.
Victoria Corlon.
Yeah, Ms. Corlon, and for the
Geleplay, and also for Cisse.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, go right ahead.
It certainly was inspiring to hear about your, certainly about Liberia, and of course, your relationship with your father. And my question to you is, what lesson or lessons did you learn from your father? What was the main message that he gave you growing up?
Resilience. Hard work. Never give up, no matter what.
That's great.
Yes.
That's great.
I have a question for the other speaker.
For Cisse.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so say they have a question for you.
Okay. I mean, wonderful presentation. But my question is, before I ask you the question, I'm from Liberia also. Okay, and I know the West got rich from our resources, like the British. You know, when Africa was colonized, they partitioned it. The British went to Nigeria, Ghana, and other places. And then also you have the French going to the Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, and other places. So the resources, our wealth, made these Western countries very rich. Now you talk about African solution to African problem. We have problem. Our young people are leaving Africa to come here and to other places, and to the point that some of them even, lost their life trying to get to the West. And we have all the resources, all of these things that could make us to stay. What do you think can happen for the young people to stay back home instead of risking their life to come here?
As I said earlier, Ethiopia has never been colonized, and the education is not supposed to be colonized either. However, our mind has got colonized post-Second World War, and as a result of which we got radicalized towards our own culture. We were told that no, this is backward. Follow the Europeans, follow the Americans. On top of that, the media, what it's doing day in and day out is that setting the standard. Beauty is this. For example, growing up, if kids, girls particularly, braid their hair to go to school, they would have been considered as backward because they were supposed to dye their hair and straight it and whatever. And now all of a sudden, through the movies and everything, now the West has started using it. Now it has become a fashion and it's no more backward. So it is for the policy and education to understand that the mind is being taken away by this kind of proliferation into the culture and education, that the kids are aspiring only, no, my country is backward. Best thing is in US. My country is backward. Best thing is in UK or whatever. That can only stop when the education is based on the indigenous knowledge. The Japanese or the Chinese, they developed their nation not by migrating to US or Europe or whatever. It is by working hard and protecting their culture.
I say this. There's one more right there.
Yes, this is for the brother. As far as you know, what countries in Africa have Africanized their curriculum and to a certain extent decolonized the mind? Do you know what countries?
That's difficult to answer. Honestly speaking, I've been traveling all over the countries. I would have expected, honestly speaking, my own country with its history and everything was supposed to be at least the one that was supposed to protect. Look what has happened to Ethiopia. With the Western theory, the young who have been studying abroad and taught with Western philosophy went into some kind of what we call the student movement and uprooted the culture not to return the same way. And as a result of which, all the mess that we are seeing in my own country as well as a result of that. So all education materials are bought from abroad. All teachers are being trained abroad. They are, instead of protecting their own culture or their own indigenous knowledge. They are rather the ambassadors of the Eurocentric thought. Therefore, I haven't come across any as yet in any given country that haven't traveled through Africa.
One more question.
This is for both speakers, actually. One of the things I've been tremendously blessed by listening to both of you today, and it has brought to my mind that education is very key for as African solution to African problems, and also for Victoria in terms of passing along our history, that we were kings and queens long before Europe was ever civilized. And so that common knowledge or that information is not commonly passed among the diaspora, the young people in the diaspora. And so they feel that to become qualified or to feel good about themselves, that they have to seek after the acclamation from other cultures. And so I know from help working with to help publish Victoria's book, I would like for her to share with you all the position in the government that her father attained to, because education, what I began to recognize and listening to you, the brothers speak, even in Ethiopia and other African countries, the challenge is that we as Black people, period, of every country and the diaspora, we are often challenged with the fact that we don't want to take the time to learn. Education is very key, but education about what is important. We can't just, like you said, separate our history from our present. And that's what I find is happening among the young people. They feel that they either have to throw out what was in history in order to advance into the current and to move on into the future in a positive way. And so I'm so glad to hear that you work with the United Nations. Hopefully you will still be able to have some impact in government, because what I see is necessary for us as a race of people and throughout this world is the two-prong effect of education, yes, but we need power. And that power to be able to negotiate and navigate in the world in which we live in 2025 has to involve government. And that's one of the weakest challenges that we have among African people. Victoria, I would like for you to share with them how far your father came.
So when we talk about education, as I said earlier, our people were fine with the way they lived. They were educated. We have this entity back home. It's called the Poro Society and Sandy Society. The Sandy for the girls and the Poro for the men. They teach young men how to become a man. Young boys, they teach them. So they would take them in the jungle or someplace else and groom them and teach them how to be a husband, how to fend for your families, and how to just live as a productive person in your society. So they were educated in that sense. But they needed to have Western education because the world was changing. And as far as I'm concerned, the world is still changing. And that's why Joseph pressed on. That's why he pushed on. He wanted them to have the Western education so that they would have a seat at the table. They could not just depend on their traditions. And because of the Western education, their minds are a little bit open now to be able to make decisions. They can vote, which never happened before. They understand how the country runs, and it's all because of the Western education. So both education important. The tradition is important, and the Western culture is also important.
So what was the position that your father reached in the government?
Oh, he was a representative. He was in the House of Representatives. That was the position. So he represented his people. He advocated for them. Yes.
All right. Ashe. Okay. Let's give them a big hand. Thank you both. Thank you both. A wonderful, wonderful presentation. We want to thank everybody for coming and want you to know that we are here at the Malefic Kete Asante Institute. We are very, very thankful for all of you who come. We have regulars and we really appreciate that so much. Don't forget, please mark on your calendar, November the 2nd, because November the 2nd, Tanuduman, who will give us an update on Sudan, and we'll talk about the history of Sudan. It will be really, really remarkable. We also are planning to have, we have a couple of things coming up. We have some other speakers that we're going to be putting on the schedule, on the calendar. But please, get your calendar. If you don't get our announcement, let us know so we can put you on the address list, the email list. Want to thank Brother Kareem always. When he's here, I feel very confident. I feel like I know what I'm doing. Dr. Jabali Ade, strong man. We appreciate him so much. He's all over the television, so we're just happy to see him. We had a wonderful day today in Philadelphia for the 30th anniversary of the Million Man March. Is there another announcement? There's another announcement. Come in, Anna Yaninga. Yeah. All right, we have two. We're going to have two books. Are your books on display out? So you should probably go out and sit at your table, please, because otherwise people are going to grab you and you won't be at your table. So, okay. But there are two. There are also, for those of you who were not able to make it here last week, Reverend Joe Williams, one of the venerable pastors in the city and also one of the great supporters of this institute through the Academy of Life. His book is out there also. He was here last week, and people were very, very pleased to see him. He was one of the last, I think he's the last living member of the Dixie Hummingbirds. If you ever heard of the Dixie Hummingbirds, I grew up in Georgia listening to the Dixie Hummingbirds, and he's the last living member. So his book is out there. We call upon our ancestors far and near, the mother of our mothers, the father of our fathers, to render mercy and to bear witness for the liberation and the victory of all oppressed people forever. And we say it is done. Ashe. Thank you very much.